Every $10 trillion of debt or so, we like to take stock of the debt we're accumulating and the associated spending resulting in said debt. And so that's been this week. But don't worry, Scott Bessent has a plan. Is this all up to Scott Bessent? That seemed to be what Vice President Vance had to say on Newsmax. I mean...
So there are a couple of things the president has talked about to try to address this problem. First of all, he's talked about a sovereign wealth fund because, as you know,
one bad idea.
Actually, the stock market, the equity market has performed a lot better than the bond market. There's a weird way where American taxpayers are getting fleeced because of the very high debt charges. By the way, very high debt charges that started under the Biden administration. This is a crisis that we inherited, and I think has gotten better. I'm not saying that everything is fixed, but it has certainly gotten better.
Sure.
The other thing is that Scott Bessent, the amazing Treasury Secretary, he has had a very discreet plan, of course, supported by the President of the United States, to get the United States to a point where our economy is growing faster than our debt. Mm-hmm. And if you look, we are on track. So even though the debt is too high, even though we inherited this debt bomb from the Biden administration, we actually do have a plan to get the economy growing faster than the debt. And that's the most important thing. The issue that we've had under the Biden administration and what we're still kind of dealing with is that the debt was growing faster than American GDP. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. That's something that we're certainly fixing every single day in the Trump administration. But you know, even though the media doesn't cover this, I'm glad you're asking this question because Scott Bessent is very much on top of it. He knows it's a problem, and he's got the president's empowerment to do something about it.
This is a one-man job then, Mr. Vice President? I mean, what is that? Our plan is that Scott Bessent has a plan. And of course, you know, the Newsmax, you know, talking points reader just accepts that without any sort of probing. It's absurd. That is a ridiculous statement. That should not be accepted at face value. Scott Bessent was asked about it as well, since he's the guy with the plan they're all waiting for. We're waiting, Scott Bessent. Go fix the $40 trillion debt problem.
To our allies, our trading partners, is that global growth is the way to take care of this mountain of debt. As the U.S. growth has picked up, over time we will be well above the CBO trend average. Then we are encouraging the rest of the world to do this too. I'm pulling for Europe, but they need to follow the Draghi report. They're mired in regulation and kind of intra-European. It's almost the equivalent of this burden that they put on themselves. And we think the rest of the world should kind of unshackle themselves, both on the energy side, on the regulatory side.
Yeah, that's all well and good, but can we get to the crux of the matter? Our states, our government spending? Can we get to that? Which also basically, by the way, crowds out private investment, as Scott Bessent certainly knows. Scott Bessent has a plan. What is that? Here's an answer you could try on for size. If you wanted to talk to adults like adults, Brian Westbury posting on X about this week, chief economist at First Trust. The only thing that will fix the debt accumulation is to stop spending. If governments actually raise taxes to levels needed to fund their current drunken largesse, they'll kill all growth and make problems worse. The other problem with all this spending is that we're borrowing from savers and giving it to consumers. We're eating our seed corn. In addition to all this, we're not hearing about the losses in pension funds, insurance companies, banks, and central banks in Europe or Japan or the U.S. They're huge. Pension funds bought debt at negative interest rates and now face huge losses. To repeat, the only way to fix this is to stop spending or somehow miraculously to lift growth rates. But governments are larger as a share of GDP, and this has reduced growth rates. Keynesianism works in the reverse way people are taught in school. It crushes growth in the long term, even though it feels good in the short term. The U.S.'s $40 trillion in debt is a long-term problem. Issuing 3-month T-bills doesn't make it a short-term problem. Buying back long-term bonds doesn't make it a short-term problem. Governments have to start facing reality and stop pursuing short-term feel-good nonsense solutions. Again, cut the size of government. But apparently nobody wants to hear that much less dare say it inside the Beltway. And that's the fact. The left, of course, will say, oh, the Trump tax cuts are responsible. Absurd. Gross national debt has increased by $17 trillion since 2019, the last 7 years. That's as much debt as the U.S. added during the entire first 225 years of its history. By the way, revenue since the BBB increased by 68% since the 2017 tax cuts into the BBB increased 68% since 2018, which is twice the rate of inflation. Revenue has averaged about 17% of GDP, which is roughly the historical norm. This is the Wall Street Journal reporting. Yet spending has averaged slightly over 24% of GDP versus a pre-pandemic historical average of 20%. So that's where it's at. But nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wanted to treat Doge with the sobriety with which it should have been treated and the long-term commitment that is required. And so we get Scott Bessent has a plan. And then Scott Bessent talks about the economic policies and regulatory policies, tax and spend policies across the pond that have led Europe to stagnate. Okay, agree. And back on the home front, what are we doing? For more on the what are we doing or what should we be doing, pleased to be joined by Scott Shellady. Scott the Cow Guy, Shellady. There it is. Can't forget that. Market specialist for Market Day Report, 10:30 to 1 p.m. And the Cow Guy Close, the host of the Cow Guy Close, 1 to 1:30, both at RFD-TV. And this segment brought to you by Home State Bank. A conversation with Scott is, consider Home State Bank as an impartial trustee to your estate and spare your family from conflict and disagreements. Talk to a Home State Bank trust officer today at 815-459-2000. Again, that's Home State Bank at 815-459-2000. Scott the Cow Guy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
Scott Bessent has a plan. Good enough for you?
It's a flippant thing to say. I totally agree. But in my lifetime, there's never been a better person to try to tackle the problem. So, one side, it's a ridiculous thing to say, but at the same time, a lot of folks won't know these names that I throw out there. But Scott Bessent came out of the George Soros Quantum Fund in the 90s, which was the most successful fund the world had ever seen. He was a youngster there cutting his teeth with a guy by the name of Stanley Druckenmiller, which is like saying, Joe Namath and Johnny Unitas. And then there was a third guy named Jim Rogers, who's an absolute genius when it comes to commodities. The four of those guys were amazing, and they're probably the smartest guys in the room. They did very well, and they've never failed. Now, I credit Scott Bessent with bringing us back from the brink when we had the Trump tariffs, when he flew down to Mar-a-Lago to tell the president to take a little bit of a pause here. We're going a little bit too far. He can see the markets, and he sees when credit spreads start to break, or he knows. He's an actual practitioner, but they're bad at making the message. The GOP's been horrible messaging all the time anyway.
I'm sorry, just sorry to interrupt, but this is not a criticism of Scott Bessent. It's to say, look, Scott Bessent can't stop Congress from spending.
No. Okay, so you're right. And so I've been talking about this on my show for 2.5 years. And you're right, Congress can't stop spending. And I have no faith that they will, unless there's some laws that are put in place. That's the only issue, because they're going to continue to spend. And the way out of this is, okay, I got the way out of this is obviously spend less, see what we can do when it comes to waste, fraud, and abuse, and then get these budgets back down to where they were before COVID. But they're not going to spend less. That's the problem. So we can't grow ourselves out of this if they don't stop spending. That whole growth and grow our way out of it just falls flat on its face if we don't get these idiots in Congress to stop it. That's the biggest problem. So number two is this. We are not going to go bankrupt. We've had an enormous amount of spending increases percentage-wise, but the net worth of the average American has outpaced that. So we're still the wealthiest country in the world. There is good news on the other side of this. However, that's not going to go very far when we talk about this money and how much we're having to spend on interest every year. But I also know this. This is a topic of conversation that's only here because we're $40 trillion in debt. We weren't talking about this at 38.5 trillion or even 39 trillion. So there is a little bit of this, oh my God, all of a sudden my hair's on fire. I mark my words, in a week and a half, we won't be talking about it. We'll be back to the status quo.
I totally agree. Completely agree.
And so
we don't need to talk about it because Scott Bessent's got a plan and he's executing it.
Well, you know what? He's got I don't know what his plan is. You know, it's not a hard plan. You're right. Whoever wrote that article, the only plan is this: stop spending. But they won't do it. So what are you going to do about this debt when you can't get Congress to stop spending? That's what you have to be asking.
Well, I mean, so on the monetary side, it would seem to me, I know this is being reported as sort of, bond chaos this week and so forth, but it seems to me that Kevin Warsh is moving in a direction opposite quantitative easing, which was essentially facilitating the profligate spending of Congress. It seems to me that he is trying to bring more sanity back to monetary policy and provide, less collaboration with the big spenders in Congress.
100%. He's trying to get back to the Greenspan era. He's trying to normalize, which is what I call it. He's trying to get the Fed out of the back pocket of the country and the consumer. But, so yes, you're right. But he's also talking about, there's thoughts that he was going to go to Jackson Hole at the end of this month and reduce the balance sheet, which is like, that's a synthetic rate hike. But at the same time, we got Bessent buying bonds out the long end, which is a synthetic rate cut out there. So we're taking blood out of our right arm right now and putting it in our left, and we're trying to tell people we're okay. But again, this is all because we've hit 40 trillion. This will be in the back pages in about a week and a half. But we do still have to stop spending. And the problem is that these numbers are so big, Dan. When you talk about $1 trillion, Congress can't get their heads around it. And I think they think the problem is like a little kid, right? The problem's too big, so I'll ignore it. That's exactly where we're at with them. It's too big, so let's ignore it.
Well, you get a sense of what they would do. The biggest of the big spenders, what they would do if they are successful in the midterms at controlling the House and or Senate. Ro Khanna's wealth tax, 5% tax in California. California policy is Illinois policy, a microcosm of what they would scale nationally if they could. The 5% wealth tax. This is such nonsense. He doesn't even understand what he's talking about. He had to have it explained to him by Bill Ackman and Mark Cuban.
Yeah. And you know how ridiculous it is? He's putting forward the fact that, say, these billionaires are not cash rich. The government will loan them money,
right,
and they'll pledge their own stock against it. That is the biggest, dumbest idea I've ever heard in my entire life, besides defund the police and no borders. This is crazy. So we're going to have the Mason-Dixon line come into play again. All those idiot blue states to the north are going to bankrupt themselves with these ideas that they can get out of it with this wealth tax, which is stealing. It's not earned income. It's not a capital gain. It's stealing people's wealth. And they say they're only going to do it once. Well, a lie. They're going to do it more than once, and they're going to do it to more people than just billionaires. It'll go to millionaires, and then it'll go to $500,000 guys and $100,000, and it gets to mom and pop. It's the biggest line. It's absolutely ridiculous. But this is what's going to happen. It's going to get some traction because people are worried about the debt. But here's the deal: why can't somebody say, "Hey, you can't manage the tax money that we give you now. What's to say you're going to manage this better?" It's insane.
Well, the good news, as long as you keep it at the failed state level, the good news is that, it will be good news for states like Texas and Florida, where these Silicon Valley founders will flee.
Absolutely right. And that's why I say no. If you draw a line from Texas over to South Carolina, there's roughly 11 states in the Southeast, right? Those 11 states on an annual basis have a GDP of $9 trillion. And if you put that against the world's GDPs, it comes in number 3 behind China and the U.S. 75% of the growth in this country in the last 5 years has been in those 11 states. There's going to be a break in this country because we've got people flourishing in the Southeast and states just languishing. New Jersey, New York, Illinois, California, above that line. That's why I say we could have a civil war, not a civil war, but an economic one.
So what's your short to medium term outlook for the markets, given everything we've discussed between the debt burden and this sort of push and pull economic and monetary policy that's being bandied about by the Trump administration, amid the AI revolution? How does this all flesh out short term, do you think?
I still think artificial intelligence is going to decimate jobs, but it's going to be fantastic for the economy, at least in the first couple of years. Now, there's going to be some gains that that hurt. Like when we start putting people out of work, the productivity gain is going to go to the bottom line of the company. But what's it going to do to the bottom line of the country when people can't afford the things you're making, right? So that'll be the second wave of it. But I'm still very bullish on what AI is going to be doing. We're only on the cusp of it, and it's also going to be deflationary, which could then help the government maybe lower lower interest rates sometime next year. So I'm bullish. I mean, we're going to have to get through this August garbage and September garbage when everybody's still, they're putting their chests out about the $40 trillion, but they didn't care about it 2 months ago, right? And also, there is a little bit of a thought going around Wall Street right now, which I do give a little bit of credit to, is that they're trying to test Kevin Warsh. Okay, Bucko, how tough are you? Let's see what you can do. Call Scott Bessent and see what your plan is. I feel like there's a little bit of that with the bond vigilantes too. And so we got some people pushing the issue. We've got folks running around worried about the $40 trillion. Once that gets to be old news and we start to see these numbers, the growth in the earnings is just insane. Profitability is insane. 4.1% employment rate. This all looks very, very good, at least in the next 3 to 6 months.
And just quickly as an aside, should Mark Walter of Guggenheim fame, soon perhaps becoming infamy, should he go to jail?
My initial response is yes, but what do you think?
Yes, I do.
All right,
from what I've read in the Wall Street Journal and what I know from people in that industry, including vets of Guggenheim. He seems to me he should go up like Ken Lay or Bernie Ebbers. Well, you know what, though? The problem is that we just never seem to have those. I mean, maybe Bernie Ebbers and Ken Lay were two outliers, but a lot of times, hey, we can't put Fauci in jail. What's our problem? Well, Mark Walter doesn't have a Biden pardon in his back pocket. Scott the Cow Guy, market specialist for Market Day Report, 10:30 to 1. Host of the Cow Guy Close 1 to 1:30, both at RFD-TV. Thanks so much, Scott. Appreciate it. All right, brother. Have a great weekend. You too. And our conversation with Scott brought to you by Home State Bank. Again, consider Home State Bank as an impartial trustee to your estate and spare your family from conflict and disagreements. Talk to a Home State Bank trust officer today at 815-459-2000. Again, Home State Bank at 815-459-2000. And Scott joined us on the elfwealthgroup.com answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
I know that hiring can be challenging. You sort through tons of resumes and you get too many so-so applicants. You're just waiting for someone to match your role perfectly. Well, now there's a place where you can meet them fast. ZipRecruiter.
Need to hire right away. Start your search for strong candidates. The right fit awaits. Build your